Super Tuesday. In the race for the White House, 1/3 of the total Democratic delegates are up for grabs today, as voters in more than a dozen states head to the polls. We're on the ground with reports in Vermont, North Carolina, and California. Vatican response. The Holy See is sending 2 of its top clergy abuse investigators to one of the largest Catholic countries. And coronavirus and Catholics. Advice on how the faithful should handle the deadly outbreak while at Mass. On EWTN News Nightly for Super Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. It is Super Tuesday and millions of voters from Maine to California are heading to the polls. The 14 coast-to-coast contests have been highly anticipated as the Democratic Party struggles to unify behind a clear message or messenger in its quest to defeat President Donald Trump. We have team coverage tonight from across the country. Owen Jensen is in North Carolina, Mark Irons is in California, and the Associated Press's Philip Crowther will join us from Vermont. But first, the last-minute push for votes.
To beat Donald Trump, we are going to need to have the largest voter turnout in the history of this country.
In Burlington, Vermont today, the candidate who labels himself an independent in the Senate votes for himself as the Democratic choice for president.
I happen to believe deeply that if we're going to defeat Donald Trump, our campaign is the campaign to do that.
But his opponents disagree. They warn his socialist proposals don't fit with the Democratic Party platform. Former Vice President Joe Biden is pushing to win the nomination.
My message is people are not looking for revolution, they're looking for results. I have the most extensive, successful record of getting big things done and big things passed. And the next president of the United States on day one is going to have to stand before the whole world, know the leaders around the world, and know that they know him.
Up for grabs on Super Tuesday, a treasure trove of 1,344 delegates. So far, just 155 delegates have been awarded. So even after the departures this week of Tom Steyer, Pete Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar, Super Tuesday has the potential to level the Democratic field.
What are your expectations? Would a third place finish be good?
If there's only 3 candidates, you can't do worse than that.
Well, there is Elizabeth Warren also.
I didn't realize she's still in. Is she?
Philip Crowther, international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press, is in Burlington, Vermont with the Bernie Sanders campaign. Philip, welcome back to the show. I know you're outside the polling station where Senator Sanders cast his vote. How are things looking for him today?
Well, look, things still look good for Bernie Sanders on this Super Tuesday. 14 states voting altogether. He still hopes that he will come out of this as the even clearer frontrunner on the Democratic Party side. He voted here at his usual polling station in Burlington. He lives just down the road from here. He was here with his wife, Jane Sanders. They spoke to us just before entering the polling station with Bernie Sanders saying he wanted to make sure he gets at least 2 votes here in Vermont. In other words, I think we know who he voted for. But Vermont isn't the key state really for him here. He's the firm favorite to win here by a very, very long stretch. The key states, of course, are California and Texas, with 415 delegates available in California, 228 in Texas. And put those 2 states together, and what Bernie Sanders hopes is a really good result for him in both, that would put him in a very, very nice position indeed.
Turning now to the Biden campaign, there's been quite a turnaround over the past several days.
Yeah, there truly has, and he couldn't have timed this that much better. The only problem is Super Tuesday, a lot of these states did early voting, meaning that those who voted for the likes of Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar, well, their votes stand for nothing right now. But this is a very big boost for the former vice president, with 3 endorsements coming in the space of 24 hours. Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, and then Beto O'Rourke as well, the former congressman from Texas. All of them now standing behind Joe Biden. And you know what Bernie Sanders calls that? He calls that the establishment of the Democratic Party coming together to make sure that he does not get the Democratic Party nomination. This really is a grouping of the moderate candidates on the Democratic side, all of them now seemingly standing behind Joe Biden to stop Bernie Sanders from getting the nomination. So really things are still looking good for Bernie Sanders, but he's got not just one opponent, but several now banding together on the other side.
Well, Philip, let's talk about the others that are still in the race. Senator Elizabeth Warren is still in the race, as is former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard. How are things shaping up for them?
Yeah, let's look at all three. Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, this is the first day that he is actually on ballots on Super Tuesday. He is on them in all 14 states plus American Samoa. And this is the day when Mike Bloomberg wants to show that he really has the clout to become the nominee for the Democratic Party. He plans to stay in this race even if there is a bad result for him on this Super Tuesday. He will be campaigning in Florida today, and that is one of the states where he will be on the ballot in the future as well. So Mike Bloomberg will be staying in the race, he says, at least. As for Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, well, we'll have to wait and see how she really does today, because that includes her home state of Massachusetts, where Bernie Sanders of Vermont, might just beat her, and that might be a reason for the senator from Massachusetts to actually possibly get out of the race. Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, the congresswoman, I don't think she'll get all too many results on this Super Tuesday, and the pressure on her to drop out will be pretty big indeed. The ballot really has changed in the Democratic Party. There are still quite a few names on there. If you look at the sample ballot here in Vermont, for example, there are all sorts of names on there from candidates who got out of the race over the last few days, weeks, or even months. But the field really has narrowed, and that is good news for two people, really, for Joe Biden and for Bernie Sanders. We expect after this Super Tuesday for this maybe to turn into a bit of a two-horse race.
All right. Well, Philip, thank you so much as always. Thank you for your analysis. Philip Crowther, international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, how much do Catholics rely on their faith and church teachings when making decisions at the ballot box? White House correspondent Owen Jensen talked to parishioners at St. Matthew's Church in Charlotte, North Carolina to find out. Owen?
Well, Tracy, good evening. St. Matthew's is a huge Catholic church here in the Charlotte area. In fact, it has more than 11,000 families that belong here. Today it also served as a polling place, and I spoke with Catholics who cast ballots. As church bells rang at St. Matthew Church, voters arrived here on Super Tuesday, walking past the cross and Mother Mary on their way to cast their ballots in an election with so much at stake. Jane just got out of daily mass.
I am torn apart by where we are politically. I feel that our faith has been definitely eroded.
Some know exactly where they stand. You voted today?
Yes, I did.
How does your faith impact whom you vote for?
It's one of the guiding principles.
It colors how I view the candidates. For instance, if they're pro-abortion, I don't vote for them.
But we also met a voter who is Catholic and also pro-abortion. She says she understands that goes against church teaching, which says life begins at conception and must be protected in the womb.
A lot of things conflict with the church. Our president conflicts with the church, or should at least.
So while voters here at St. Matthew's Church head to the polls on this Super Tuesday, President Trump isn't taking any of their votes for granted. He rallied supporters last night here in Charlotte, and he brought up faith.
We believe in the dignity of work and the sanctity of life. That is why I've asked Congress to prohibit late-term abortion of babies, because Republicans believe that every child is a sacred gift of God.
Meanwhile, back at church, this woman from India, working on gaining her U.S. citizenship one day, looks forward to the day she can cast her ballot. And when she does,
I believe in the principles of the church, where there is equality for everybody, and I believe that our government over here as well should abide with those principles of my faith.
Now, we saw a steady stream of voters here at St. Matthew's today, and we'll stick around in North Carolina and bring you the election results tomorrow. Tracy?
Correspondent Owen Jensen reporting tonight from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you, Owen. Well, Bernie Sanders has predicted victory in California as the votes keep coming in. Over 400 delegates are up for grabs, and the state's massive Catholic population can play a major role in who wins. Correspondent Mark Irons reports now from our EWTN Orange County studios in California. Mark?
Tracy, the California state government is completely controlled by the Democratic Party. Now, within the wide Catholic population, which is largely Latino here in Southern California, we are seeing some diversity in political persuasion. It's safe to say not all Catholics agree.
Democrats rallying for votes in California, a crucial state with the most delegates up for grabs today.
We are going to defeat the most dangerous president in American history.
With more than 13 million Catholics residing in California, the Catholic vote has a huge impact. And Latinos make up a large percentage of the church here.
That the Latino presence in California, particularly in Southern California, is tangible.
This Super Tuesday, Dalila Vasquez, the executive director of the Catholic Association of Latino Leaders, is encouraging Latino Catholics to go to the polls.
So right now, the important issue is to get people out to vote, to build confidence in their civic duty, to be able to voice an opinion.
We found the opinions vary, speaking with daily massgoers in Bellflower, California.
I support Donald Trump, and I support him because he is pro-life, like pro-family.
I like Bernie Sanders. I like his ideas. I really think that he can be a good president.
And more diversity in thought from one Catholic at an Elizabeth Warren rally at East Los Angeles College.
She has the type of leadership that I look for in leaders, and I think she'd make the best president.
According to the latest EWTN Real Clear Opinion research poll, a little less than half of U.S. Catholics, 47%, approve of President Trump's job performance. Wynette Sills, the director of Californians for Life, is one of them.
His policies have been very strongly pro-life, more pro-life than any president in memory.
Sills says in this Democratic-controlled state, with abortion access expanding, California Catholics should do more to fight for life.
Our sidewalks in front of our abortion clinics here in California, we have over 150 abortion businesses in our state, and we can go and be a voice offering assistance to women and love and faith and compassion.
It is an uphill battle for conservatives here in California. And looking ahead to the presidential election in November, keep a little history in mind. It's been 32 years since a Republican nominee won this state. California did turn red for George H.W. Bush in 1988 on his way to the White House. Tracy.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting from California for us tonight. Thank you, Mark. And stay with EWTN News Nightly for comprehensive coverage of Super Tuesday voting. We'll have reports and analysis tomorrow evening on the broadcast. Coming up, an update on the fight for the unborn in Colombia, and where the Vatican is sending two of its top clergy abuse investigators later this month. The global economy reeling from the impact of the coronavirus. And in an emergency move today, the United States Federal Reserve cut interest rates, making it cheaper to borrow money for cars, homes, and business loans. Italy, which is on the brink of a recession, is the epicenter of the outbreak in Europe. Today, Italian officials said the number of deaths now stands at 79. That is double since yesterday. Most cases are in the industrial region of Lombardy, where schools have been closed for over a week. Here in the United States, there have been at least 9 deaths from the coronavirus, all in the Seattle region. The House of Representatives is set to vote on billions to combat the outbreak later this week. Joining me now from Rhode Island to talk about the coronavirus from both a medical and a Catholic perspective is Dr. Timothy Flanagan. He is a professor of medicine at Brown University, infectious disease specialist at the Miriam and Rhode Island hospitals, and a Catholic deacon. Dr. Flanagan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. So the coronavirus has infected more than 90,000 people worldwide and killed more than 3,100. As an infectious disease specialist, should we be concerned?
Sure. This is a very difficult, terrible new infection, and it's spread like many other respiratory infections, similar to flu, and you can think about it in that same way. And flu has obviously caused many more infections and many more deaths, but this is new. And so we are struggling to meet the challenges of it carefully, and it's difficult and very, very tough.
What precautions should people be taking at this point?
We have a good idea of how this is spread. It's spread through droplets through the mucous membranes. And that means hand washing, using alcohol-based hand sanitizers, not touching our mouths, not shaking hands the way we do. This is a time where you might want to touch your elbow and keep a little bit of a distance. But it doesn't mean that life should stop. We need to keep calm and carry on. But each of us can make a real difference in the spread of this infection. We've seen this with other infections. If you're ill, meaning a fever or a cough, or you've got a terrible cold and your nose is running all the time, that's a good time to stay at home.
Yeah, well, this certainly leads me to my next question. The virus has changed the way that a lot of us live our daily lives, yes. And in fact, including Mass as well. A lot of people are not, shaking hands for the sign of peace, so just kind of nodding and at communion as well. What's your advice for Catholics during this time?
Well, the sacraments and the Mass is so critical for us. It's really the center of our faith, and Jesus is present. So being able to receive communion and the other sacraments, confession, and even the sacrament of the sick is so, so important, and it can be done safely. But this is a time where we want to forgo shaking of hands, as you say, at the sign of peace, but we need to smile double and show our support and our welcoming attitude. We should be receiving communion, but it can be done with communion on the hand with minimal contact in that regard. Certainly confession, totally safe, and the other sacraments can be done. So even the oils can be applied with a cotton ball. So there are ways to do this safely, and our churches need to stay open. We need to help each other, but we also need to strengthen our faith, our prayer life, and we need to worship together. And this is possible. We should avoid a lot of crowding. So all being crammed together is not good. But most of our churches, we're not jammed together. There's plenty of room in the pews, so we can go to church and Mass safely.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor. We really appreciate it. Dr. Timothy Flanagan, thanks again for your insight.
Happy to help.
Iran has tripled its stockpile of enriched uranium over the last few months, and the United Nations says that not only is a violation of its deal with world powers, but Iran is also refusing to answer questions about secret nuclear sites. The International Atomic Energy Agency is the UN's nuclear watchdog. It put out a confidential report this week saying that Iran gave no response to inquiries about undeclared nuclear sites. In Israel, the third election in less than a year is looking like a decisive win for the prime minister. Benjamin Netanyahu claiming victory at a rally in Tel Aviv. Polls show Netanyahu's Likud party, along with smaller ultra-religious and nationalist parties, won 59 seats in parliament, but that is too short of a majority. Netanyahu is promising to work to form a new coalition government, but he is facing a corruption trial that starts in 2 weeks. German bishops elect their new leader. Bishop Georg Batzing of Limburg was chosen to oversee Germany's 27 Catholic dioceses. The German Bishops' Conference is working to reform the Catholic Church in that country. Topics of a 2-year initiative include the clergy abuse crisis, the position of women in the church, and sexual morality. The Vatican is sending 2 of its top sex abuse investigators to Mexico. The world's second largest Catholic country is coming to terms with decades of clergy sex abuse and cover-up. This is not the first time Archbishop Charles Scicluna of Malta and Monsignor Jordi Bertomeu of Spain have teamed up. In 2018, the 2 investigated the Chilean church, which resulted in every active Chilean bishop offering to resign. Their mission to Mexico will begin at the end of the month. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us now. Ed, thanks for joining us. So what more do we know about this mission to Mexico?
Well, this is more of a kind of assistance mission, Tracy, than an investigation. And it's been called for by the bishops of Mexico because of decades of abuse and cover-up that are in the country. But they also want the 2 investigators to come, as they say, to protect the most vulnerable, which obviously the abuse victims are, and they feel that this investigation will do that. But they're also very keen that these 2 bishops, who have a lot of experience in this area, do carry out the task well, and of course give them the kind of feedback that they want.
And what are some of the recent cases that we can expect them to investigate?
Well, we don't know any particular cases, but we do know that 271 cases have been reported over the past 10 years only. And this is the second largest Catholic country in the world. So the potential is for a lot of cases to be uncovered. And that's another reason why these two investigators have gone to the country.
When those investigators arrive, what exactly will they do there?
Well, their first meetings are going to be with the bishops who invited them. They're then going to meet religious superiors. And then most of the time they're going to spend meeting victims and abuse survivors. They've been encouraged to come forward with any information of abuse in the past. And there's a statute of limitations going back 10 years. So any of those abuse victims who've been abused over that time are free to come forward. And I think probably over 10 years as well. It'll be very much similar to what happened in Chile in 2018. These two investigators went there for the same sort of reasons and uncovered extensive abuse in that country.
And I'd like to move on to some other news. An Italian newspaper is reporting that Pope Francis was tested for the coronavirus due to his being ill. Can you talk about that report and exactly what it says?
Yes, well, the report in Il Messaggero, the Italian newspaper, said that he was tested for the coronavirus. We don't know when, probably over the weekend, and it turned out to be negative. People were concerned because the Pope has been suffering from a cold since Thursday or Friday last week, and some suspected that he may have contracted this virus. He did meet a group of Iranian delegates at the end of January, I think, and that people felt that he may have contracted it from them, but thankfully he hasn't, and so he was given the all clear. But he has cancelled a few events, and he cancelled 2 big audiences over the weekend.
Do you know, are any Vatican events being impacted by the virus?
Yes, we heard today that one of the big events for the Pope this year, the Global Pact on Education, which he's been hoping would take place in May, that's going to be postponed now to October because of the coronavirus, and that people, they think, won't be able to make it to the event. They're expecting many leaders, rather, representatives of civil and political life to come to that. And so they postponed that. There's also been another big event that the Pope wanted to hold at the end of this month, which has been postponed on the economy of Francesco, which is a meeting to really focus on the Pope's vision for the economy, and that's been postponed until November 21st. So there have been a couple of big events which have been postponed, but as in the Vatican itself, it's pretty much carrying on as normal, and that we're still having masses celebrated here, and most of the events seem to be taking place.
All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for your insight. Always appreciate it. Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thank you again, Ed.
Thank you, Tracy.
Colombia's Supreme Court voted yesterday in favor of upholding the nation's pro-life law. Pro-life and pro-abortion groups rallied outside of the Supreme Court to demand action on their corresponding sides of the debate. Judges ruled to continue allowing the procedure only when medically necessary. Up next, Pope Francis issues an invitation to the faithful around the world. We'll explain. Deadly tornadoes in Tennessee last night, and the number of people killed is now up to 22. It happened around 2 in the morning while most people were sleeping. The Nashville area got hit the hardest. More than 140 buildings were destroyed, and the state capitol is closed. President Trump is scheduled to tour that area on Friday. The U.S. Supreme Court is going to hear arguments in the Louisiana abortion case tomorrow. And it's the first time the new justices, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, will hear an abortion case. The 2 Trump appointees could tip the scales. They'll hear arguments on the Louisiana law that requires doctors to have admitting privileges from a nearby hospital in order to perform an abortion. The Supreme Court already struck down 2 other Louisiana abortion laws. Pope Francis appoints a Spanish-born missionary priest priest as the new auxiliary bishop of Rockville Center in New York. Father Luis Miguel Romero has been the pastor at the church on Long Island. He joins 3 other auxiliary bishops serving the Diocese of Rockville Center. Romero was born in Spain and was ordained as a priest in 1981. An ordination mass is set for April 16th at the Cathedral of St. Agnes. And finally tonight, Pope Francis invites Catholic communities around the world to take part in an initiative in May.
Renuevo mi llamado urgente a responder la crisis ecológica.
Laudato Si Week will mark the 5th anniversary of the Pope's letter asking Catholics to take better care of the environment. The Holy Father hopes the week will be marked by the faithful taking bolder actions to help the environment. He says, quote, "Let's take care of creation, a gift of our Creator, God." And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.